Alright, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into a chilling real-life mystery that perfectly and tragically illustrates the absolute fragile limits of human attention. You know, we usually think of major plane crashes as the result of massive, catastrophic system failures. A wing falls off, an engine explodes, right? But what happens when the failure isn't in the machine at all, but rather in where we choose to focus our eyes? Today, we're breaking down the deeply fascinating story of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 to understand exactly how a completely preventable disaster unfolded in the darkened skies over Florida.
So, here is the core paradox we're untangling today. Starting on a cold, clear night in December 1972, on a flight heading from JFK down to Miami, we have to ask, how does a tiny 20-cent light bulb end up dooming one of the most sophisticated pieces of machinery ever built by human hands? Keep this question in the back of your mind, because the answer lies entirely in human psychology.
Let's start with part one, the perfect flight. Now, everything about the beginning of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 signaled a completely routine, incredibly safe trip. And that's mostly because there was just an incredible level of sheer competence in this cockpit. Between the three of them, Captain Robert Loft, First Officer Albert Stockstill, and Flight Engineer Donald Repo, they had over 50,000 hours of total flight experience. Think about that. Captain Loft alone had been with the airline for 32 years. These were not rookies. They were seasoned, well-rested veterans of the sky who had flown through an era of immense technological change. They were the absolute definition of reliable.
And back in the cabin, the vibe was just as routine. 163 passengers had boarded this brand new jumbo jet. But there's this incredible kind of eerie twist of fate here. The roads in New York that evening were so heavily clogged with holiday traffic that 65 passengers actually missed the flight. For the 163 who made it on board, they probably felt like they'd caught a really lucky break. But as fate would have it, those 65 people fuming in traffic were actually the truly fortunate ones.
Moving on to part two, a modern marvel. To really understand the gravity of what went wrong, you have to understand the sheer technological power of the aircraft they were flying. The Lockheed L-1011 TriStar was an absolute pinnacle of engineering. It was packed with redundant systems designed to make flying safer and easier than ever before. I mean, it had 4 hydraulic systems instead of the usual 3. It was literally the first wide-body aircraft certified to land entirely automatically in zero visibility conditions. It was specifically designed to reduce the pilot's workload, basically managing all the complex flying mechanics so the crew could just oversee the systems. Aviation experts at the time were absolutely blown away by it. One quote perfectly summed up the awe. The Lockheed L-1011 was pretty much an aircraft from science fiction. It gave everyone aboard this tremendous sense of security. As they made their way down the East Coast, the autopilot was practically flying the plane itself, while the crew enjoyed a super smooth, uneventful 2-hour ride toward Florida. But the physical environment outside the aircraft was setting a really subtle trap. As they approached Miami, the weather was perfect, great visibility, light winds. But because they were approaching from the west, they were flying directly over the Florida Everglades. And on this specific night, it was clear, but completely moonless. That meant below them was a pitch-black, entirely featureless void. No city lights, no mountains, no horizon line to give them any visual sense of where the ground was. Which brings us to part 3, the missing green light. It's crazy how quickly a mundane detail can derail an entire routine. At about 11:30 p.m., they're lining up for their final approach, and the captain orders the landing gear to be lowered. Normally, when the gear is down and locked, pilots expect to see 3 bright green lights pop up on the console, one for each of the main gears and one for the nose gear. But that is not what happened. They got 2 green lights for the main gear and a terrifying, completely blank space where the nose gear indicator should be. It wasn't red, which would mean it's still moving. It was just dead. Instantly, the crew is hit with a critical question. Is there actually a mechanical failure with the nose landing gear, or is it just a faulty light bulb? The stakes here are life and death. If they assume it's just a burnt-out bulb, commit to landing, and they're wrong. The nose of this massive jumbo jet would scrape against the runway at hundreds of miles an hour. That would be absolutely catastrophic. They were just 90 seconds from touchdown when they noticed this missing light. So, displaying excellent judgment, Captain Loft calls off the landing. They initiate a go-round, pulling the aircraft back up to 2,000 feet. They contact air traffic control, who tells them to head north and maintain their altitude. The first officer engages the autopilot, setting it to strictly hold them at 2,000 feet. At this exact moment, the crew is doing everything perfectly. They're buying themselves time to troubleshoot.
But here comes part 4, the fatal fixation.
Now, safely on autopilot, the entire cockpit starts focusing on that little light socket. And when I say everyone, I mean literally everyone. Instead of one person flying the plane while the others troubleshoot, all 4 men in the cockpit, the captain, the first officer, the flight engineer, and even a visiting technician sitting in the jump seat, become completely consumed by this stubborn bulb. They flick all the panel lights. Yep, the bulb is definitely burned out. But when they try to pull it out, it's jammed. They're jiggling it, twisting it, pulling on it. The first officer even asked for pliers, but was worried he'd shatter the glass. They were entirely fixated on this 20-cent piece of plastic.
Since they couldn't trust the light, they had to verify the gear visually. To do this, Captain Loft orders the flight engineer, Repo, down into what aviators affectionately call the hellhole. It's this super crammed avionics bay located literally beneath the floor of the cockpit, and you get to it through a little trapdoor. Down there, there's a small peephole that allows you to physically look outside and confirm if the nose gear's locked into place.
This right here is where an invisible chain of errors kicks off. While he's ordering Repo down into the hellhole, Captain Loft turns around in his seat, and in doing so, his knee unknowingly bumps against the control column, the steering wheel of the airplane. He didn't feel it, and nobody saw it happen. But that slight bit of pressure was just enough to tell the airplane's advanced computers that the pilot wanted to take over. The autopilot quietly disconnected the altitude hold function and stepped down into a manual mode. The tiny little light on the dashboard that said ALT simply blinked off. No loud alarms, no bells, just silence.
Now you might be wondering, why on earth was there no alarm? Well, the plane was originally in altitude hold, keeping them safely parked at 2,000 feet. But when the yoke was bumped, the system dropped into what's called control wheel steering, or CWS. In CWS, the autopilot still keeps the wings level, but it hands the pitch, the up and down motion, directly back to the pilots. The plane didn't sound a warning because, mechanically speaking, the autopilot hadn't failed. It was just doing exactly what it thought the captain had commanded by pushing the yoke.
Which leads us to part 5, the silent descent.
With the altitude hold disengaged and the crew's hands entirely off the controls, this massive jet begins a slow, completely unnoticeable descent into the darkness. The intense irony of this exact moment is captured in a frustrated joke made by Captain Loft on the cockpit voice recorder. He said they were just, quote, screwing around with that damn 20-cent piece of light equipment on this plane. He was laughing with his crew, absolutely unaware that this trivial little distraction was literally sealing their fate. 50,000 hours of experience completely neutralized because nobody was actually flying the airplane.
And remember that pitch black environment we talked about? Outside, there was zero visual reference to tell them they were falling out of the sky. Over the Everglades on a moonless night, it's basically like flying inside a bottle of black ink. Without a horizon line, the human inner ear just cannot detect a slow, steady descent. The only way to know they were losing altitude was to look directly at the altimeters on the dashboard. But again, everyone's eyes were glued to that broken light socket.
The contrast between what's happening in the cockpit and the cabin at this point is truly chilling. While these highly trained pilots stared at a hole in the console, passengers in the back were just looking out the windows. Some of them later recalled seeing a ground-based lighted radio antenna pass by their windows, almost exactly at eye level. The plane was getting dangerously close to the swamp, and the passengers actually had a far better view of reality than the flight crew did. Still completely oblivious, the captain asks about their fuel situation to figure out how much longer they can afford to circle around fixing the light. The response is 52.5, meaning they had 52,500 pounds of fuel left. Hearing this, the crew feels totally relaxed. They believe they're safely cruising at 2,000 feet and have literally all the time in the world to solve this puzzle before heading back to the airport.
Then, suddenly, just as they finally managed to pry that stubborn bulb out of the socket, First Officer Stockstill glances at his instruments. He looks at the airspeed indicator. The numbers had crept up to 175 knots. Because the plane's nose was angled down, gravity was naturally speeding them up. He calls out the number, and in a fraction of a second, the illusion of safety shatters. The pilots realize they are nowhere near 2,000 feet, but it was far too late. We're going to leave this explainer on that cliffhanger, forcing us to really look at the terrible cost of lost situational awareness. The story of Flight 401 isn't just an aviation tragedy. It's a profound lesson on the massive vulnerabilities of the human mind. When the world goes black around us, how much of our reality becomes strictly limited to what we choose to focus on? How often in our own lives and in our own complex systems do we completely fixate on the 20-cent problems, absolutely blind to the massive realities crashing down around us? It's a vital question to ask, and a lesson we should never forget. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep your eyes on the horizon.